everyone. I'm Angela, and I've got my husband joining me tonight. I'd like him to kind of make some things clear for us about the fact that men are told not to cry, to be tough, to not be in their hearts, just to be tough, and to not be emotional. And if they ever do display that kind of thing, they're made fun of. It's always been that way. I can't remember a time when it wasn't that way. And us women have been, the crybabies, the emotional ones, the not so smart because we're so gullible, because we're so naive, because we're women. And, unfortunately, it's always been that the women have been considered and called to be the lesser of the two, which I absolutely do not believe is true at all. And but there's a wound. So a woman was saying the other day, and I don't remember who it was. I can't remember, think of it for the life of me, but Dan was listening, just saying that the women have a wound in the abdomen, and men have the wound in the heart. Because when you don't have the balance between, I want to say, the left brain and the right brain, the men have always been more the logical and reason side of things, and women are more on the creative, sensitive, emotional side of things. They both need to come into the middle. And when I was first with Dan, this was my second marriage. Dan and I have been married 19 years now. And I realized that, at the very beginning of our relationship, I realized that it's a woman's job to try to become a little bit more like the man, and the man to become a little bit more like the woman. And that beautifully in the middle, that there's beauty there. There's strength. That a woman is strong and a man is sensitive. And there's a beauty in that. And Dan has a wonderful, beautiful sensitivity. He definitely has embraced some of the sensitivity, female things in his personality, even since I've known him. And I know I've developed a lot of strength. When I met Dan, my voice was so small that you could hardly even hear me. And it was so irritating to me. I didn't even notice that my voice was like that. I don't know if you guys can maybe relate to this. A lot of times you don't realize it, but people are not hearing you and you don't understand why that is. And come to find out, someone's honest and says, I could hardly even hear you talk. Your voice is so small. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Very small.
Dan saw that in me. So I just want to talk about it from a man's point of view for a minute, Dan. What's it like being a man who, you feel like you shouldn't cry? What's that like inside of you when you want to and you can? What do men experience?
Yeah, I just want to say, the church, has put these roles together, these, unnatural roles that men, make the final decision. Men, do this, so it's like you said, the women are kind of second. And so, we learned from our fathers, not to cry. If a woman sees you cry, never let them see a sweat. Remember, the guy used to put the battery on his shoulder and he said, never let them see a sweat.
That's funny.
And so, there's even a song out now. It's called, I forget what the song was, but um, it's a guy I like, but he's doing this song about fathers, and about fathers are to be emotionless, and fathers carry this enormous load and they never show this emotion. That the guy who just left our house is a good man, never lets his wife see any pain whatsoever. And it's totally unbalanced. It's totally left brain. It's totally, men are just logic and reason. That's all we are. We're not emotional. We're not feeling. That's kind of the way I grew up. You know what I mean? My dad was unfeeling. My dad never said I loved you.
That's such a weird thing.
Yeah. And so, you're just a worker. You go out and you lift the heavy weight. You know what I mean? You get up in the morning and have your coffee and you go in and, you drive the people, so to speak. You know what I mean?
When did you first kind of notice that rule? Do you remember anything like the beginning of that when you were a kid? Do you remember when your dad first kind of like showed you that?
Yeah. Yeah. When he used to go out in the car. Because see, my dad would be emotional, right? But he would go out in the car and we would just watch him from in the house. We'd look out the window and he'd just sit in there and he'd do thinking, and he'd just do this for hours, because he had my mother was troubled. And so he would go out there and just be in that mind all the time. And he did. He went off to work. Mother stayed home.
So he's going to try to figure it out, which is the logic and the reason, how to reason your way out of the whole
And
thing.
he wasn't the lover. He didn't have the love.
Right.
And not that he wasn't, but his role in his mind, what was taught to him by his father and grandfather, were just, you go to work and the woman, is the emotional one. She takes care of the baby, she breastfeeds, she nurtures, she
Cleans.
does all this, cleans. And so that's just the status quo. But that doesn't mean it's right. You know,
No.
it doesn't mean that a man's even normal if he's operating only out of that side. And
So in your gut, you knew your dad was out there probably inside crying at least
yeah,
because he didn't know what to do, but he's not allowed to show that. You know, I
and you
was
couldn't get any mental support from him,
no,
any endearment, any, you know, there wasn't even an I'm proud of you, you know, anything like that.
you know,
Most of the kids didn't get that when they were growing up.
and he also couldn't share his feelings with the family and say, you guys, you know, or maybe say, sons, my sons, I'm hurting today because your mother is suffering so badly, and I'm not sure what to do, and maybe even have a cry with you and let you guys share how you're feeling and what you're experiencing. That should not be. So you just don't have that talk, right?
Well, we're not educated. And we're just now coming into, you know, a time of enlightenment, you know, where it's okay, you know, we're now moving into multifaceted beings, you
Yeah.
know, like you're saying, you know, you're coming back to the women. A woman needs to be a little tougher. A woman needs to be tough when she needs to be tough, and she needs to be loving when she needs to be loving. And why would that be any different for a man? A
Exactly.
man needs to be loving and kind and understanding, and I hear you, a good listener, you know, remind himself to compliment his wife, compliment his kids, give his
Mhm.
kids hugs, look at them in the eyes, tell them they love them. You know, so that's what's making life more beautiful as we move into the sense that we're not just male and female. The
Yeah.
Bible actually says that the two were one in the beginning. I made them both male and female. I made them.
Mhm.
And so we were multifaceted back then, but I don't know what happened.
I don't
But
either.
what I do know is the church and the authoritarian male dominated world we live in has really practiced that. I know a lot of women got burned at the stake. Maybe that's where that wound came from.
Yeah, we're gonna talk
Any
about
woman
that.
who was empowered or, you know, strong was sort of a threat to their ego and had to be silenced and, you know, had to keep their place. So that's the church brought a lot of that in. I'll just say that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, and we'll talk about, hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute about Eve and Adam in the beginning. But it's interesting. Henry Wright, who had this wonderful facility in Thomaston, Georgia, called Be in Health. And oh my gosh, he had this seminar going on, and I think there were about, I don't know, 800, 600, 600 to 800 people in the room, men and women combined. And he was having everyone stand up if they've ever heard their father say, I love you. So we stood up if we've heard our father say, I love you before. And you know what? It was weird, guys. I was one of the few in the room that ever had my father say, I love you. And everyone else were still sitting. They had never heard their father say, I love you. And I was floored. I think everybody in the room was floored. And this guy said that every time he does a seminar, he has people stand, you know, one way or the other. Has your father ever said, I love you? And very few stand. And in each and every seminar. So it wasn't just that one. Amazing to me. It broke my heart. So what they did was they had a whole bunch of men as surrogates stand down at the bottom as volunteers to pretend to be your father. And then if you have not heard your father say, I love you, you're allowed to go to any of them that you feel comfortable. And then they pretended to be what they feel your father would have wanted to say to you, but never did. So, oh my gosh, every man was crying. Every man in the place was crying. And because he was hearing for the first time a man, you know, standing in as their father, who's made a lot of time, you know, now dead or whatever, saying, son, I'm very proud of you. You're amazing. And you are amazing. You're so strong. And I really love you, son. I just want you to know that. And I'm sorry I never said I love you, because I do. And I'm sorry I've not said it. It's just the way I was taught. And then they hug and, oh, it's just crying all around. It's the most amazing thing. But, you know, I want to go to the Proverbs 31 woman. Um, you know, the Bible tries to make it that women are weak. They're the lesser vessel, we're the weaker vessel, this kind of thing. Well, okay, yeah, physically, why don't we just admit that? What's wrong with that? I don't mind being, you know, allowing a man who's stronger physically than me to take that load. I'm ever so grateful. things have gotten really lopsided lately where women are trying really hard to become more manly too far to the male side. And I'm seeing the men become too far to the female side. It's getting now out of balance the other way. And we need to come actually in the middle where we're both male and female, made he them, strong. Okay, that's what we need. So the Proverbs 31 woman, if you read that story in the Bible, it talks about an amazing woman, a woman who was married to a man with wealth, it seemed to me, but I think she was probably responsible for the fact that he was wealthy because of what it goes on to say. It said that she got up early in the morning and prepared for her servants. And so that they would have, their thing to do for the day, but she got up early before anyone else and developed their day for each and every one. And then she went off into the marketplace and she bought and she sold and she went to other lands and she bought lands and she sold and she bought and had wool made and sold fabrics and did all these amazing things, showing that she was a businesswoman and that she had to have male energy. I mean, think about it. If she went out to buy lands and sell lands, out in the world, she had to have a strong demeanor to handle men in the man's world, don't you think? So she wasn't weak. Trust me, she wasn't weak. And it said that she, made wealth for her husband. So she was, given the responsibility to take his wealth and make that wealth larger. That's pretty special. And that's pretty trusting that he trusted her that way to do such things for him and to increase his wealth. And that's what she did. That is not weak in any way. And don't you think that's amazing, Leon?
Yeah, and what I think eventually, I mean, this is going to sound extreme, but I think eventually we're going to lose the word male energy and female energy because that energy don't belong to me. You have a left brain and a right brain. I have a left brain and a right brain. So don't you think eventually we're going to lose that? Right now, it's a good one to say that's male, and it helps us identify
Left brain, right brain.
the roles and and how we need to move into the middle place. But I think eventually it's just gonna be energy. Yeah, if the male, some males like that power over women. Some in a lot of churches, men love
yeah.
the adoration and they're the man and they get to make the last decision and women have to stay married to their men no matter what. And there's a lot of people that love it, but the truth of it is the energy itself is just neutral. It's God-given. It's pure energy. It's consciousness. And so left brain consciousness, right brain consciousness is the same thing, right?
Right.
And so pretty soon I think there's going to be another language for the consciousness, but I think what you're saying helps us understand what's going on in our world and the roles that we've been playing that have been totally limiting. They're not very beautiful, honestly. A man in a relationship that's totally left brain, that's no fun. A woman that's just totally weak and you know what I mean, just thinks she's only this little woman housekeeper. Women are so much more than that. Angela plays music, writes books, runs businesses. She's multi talented, and that's beautiful. And I like to see a strong woman. I like to see a healthy woman. I like to see someone who can be in charge and stand on her own 2 feet. That's really, really beautiful to me. And it's the same thing. If she can see that in me, this man who can go to work, he can put his arm around her and cry with her, and he'll pick up a baby, or the cat will love on him because he's loving, and it adds so much more color to the relationship and so much more depth. And I think that's been lacking. Me and Angela work in households all the time. And the male energy is so strong here, where we live in Idaho. It's so churchy. It's so, let me see what you're doing here in my kitchen, and the woman just sort of steps aside, and go, I hope he likes it. The color that she's going to be in the kitchen to enjoy, he chooses because he's the male.
Yeah, I believe that strongly that way, that when we first came here to Boise, which was already 8-9 years ago now, and it was so weird to see that where she had no say, and that was a really freak thing.
Yeah, and it's heavily churched here. So like in Denver, when you went to Denver, maybe a woman would say, now Charles, you need to go in the other room because I have some decision to make. Very empowered, you know?
Or what do you
And
think?
the husband goes, well, I know not to get in the way of that one, you know,
Uh-huh.
that's her domain in there.
Right.
And it was respectful. And when
Mhm.
we came here, it was a little more of that, a lot more of that
Oh,
authoritarian.
jeez.
You ain't gonna do this to my kitchen, the guy, you know, we're like, well, when you and your wife decide what you want to do, then we'll come in and do it. But very much authoritarian, very much,
Oh
and
gosh.
it's not very pretty.
No,
That's what I
it
want to say.
isn't.
It's not beautiful. And relationships were meant to be beautiful, or were to have a lot of depth, yeah, you know, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I remember at this one of the first jobs we went to, um, the guy, I went in and I just kind of explained what I always explained at our appointments when we were in Denver. And he looked at me like, ma'am, excuse me, this is not your place. Please shut up and allow us to have this conversation. And I'm like, what? Oh my God. You know, and he was serious. And we did not get that job. I'm sure because my energy reeked of how dare you, you know. I was like, I don't know. I think I did my job anyway, you
You
know.
even told one guy you wanted to give his wife a book, and he says, I'll read it and
Oh,
then I'll give
right.
it to her." And Angela said, "No, I didn't
No.
give it to you. I gave it to your wife, and I will give it to her myself, and I will want a review from her about the book." It was on
Yeah,
codependency,
yeah,
and you know,
yeah.
but it was like
He wasn't gonna
control,
have it.
and so
No,
not very pretty.
no,
So
not
what
very pretty.
Angela's talking about here is relationships that can become very beautiful if we can move into more into the center place of these both these roles,
Yeah,
these
and
polar opposites they call them.
yes, and get rid of the oppression on the woman's side. I think women, you know, they said that the oppressed become the oppressor. Okay, so what happens is a woman is oppressed or a man is oppressed, whatever, and then they fight back and say no more, and then they become too much in the dominant side because they've been oppressed. See, so then they have begun now to be oppressing the very ones who oppress them. And it goes the other way around too. You know, if a man has been abused, he's gonna, you know, fight back, and he's gonna become the aggressor eventually. It's just the way it works. So it always comes back around. But I want to talk to you about one other thing. It talks about in the Bible how that a man. Oh, it says, Dan, where is it? Ephesians or Corinthians, where a man is to love. Husbands, love your wives, and women, you are to respect your husbands. It's interesting that it doesn't say men, love your wives. Wives, love your husbands. Don't you think that seems logical that it would say that? But it doesn't. It says, women, you are to respect your husbands. Men, the husbands, you are love
Love
your
your
wife. Why? Why this difference? Okay. So I'll tell you why I believe the difference is because men have been taught to be in the reason, the logic, tough, you know, I want to be respected. I want to be honored. I'm tough, you know?
I'm the
And
provider.
yeah, and so they closed off their hearts so that they're not any longer receiving properly. They've gotten hard, too much hard. And so they just want to be respected. And that makes me happy. If they were normal and everything was right within their heart, they would be ever so glad to also be loved, you know, but right now they just want to be respected. And so, and then, and then they're asking the men to do the very thing that they can't do because they're not in their heart space. And that is to love your wives, which it's about an impossibility for them. So women end up loving their husbands and don't respect them. And men, they struggle to properly love their wives because they're not in their heart space. They've been closed off like a, you know, like a rock for so many because that's how they were taught to be. That this heart should not be pliable and soft and tender and all of that. And so this is
You're
a
vulnerable.
yes, and we all need to be both, you know, vulnerable and able to express yourself and say what hurts and say what bothers you, and then also to be strong and valiant when you need to be. So I don't know. I just want to see things change in this very area, and I kind of want to talk about the original wounding and where that originally came from. So this woman that Dan and I heard was talking about this wound of the woman in the abdomen. So what's in the abdomen? It's the place where us women have our ovaries. It's the place where we carry our babies. It's a place where that we carry our emotions. Our emotions are carried there. They say that that area of our body is another heart right there. If you could believe that, a lot of men used to talk about their what do they call it, their gut. You know that you even talk about people talk about that. You know, I got a gut feeling. You know, there's a heart there, a brain, if you will, in that area. So a woman has been wounded there. And, originally where that came from, and this is talked about in the Bible, it's in Jeremiah, prophet talked about a woman named Rachel weeping for her children. So that what that's talking about is what they say is that Rachel, she had a son, Joseph, who was the only son that she had. And her sister, who also was married to her husband, is Rachel and Leah in the Bible. She had, more than one. And she made fun of that sister. Her sister had one child, and then the brothers from that other wife were jealous of him. And so they hated him so much to the point that they stole him off and actually ended up selling him off to a Pharaoh type person. And then he was never seen again. So that mother was weeping for her child. Well, she got pregnant again, and when that child was born, Benjamin, then she died. And so, anyway, I'm sure that there was a lot said about how she wept for her son because it was the only son that she had until she had another one, and then she died immediately on childbirth. So they said that she had this Benjamin child when she was traveling to Jerusalem, and she actually died and was buried in Bethlehem. And interesting because that is exactly where years later Jesus was born. And so it ended up that the Pharaoh, when he found out about that there's going to be there was a man child who was born already according to the stars, the wise men, he had to go check and see when this prophecy in the Bible was going to happen, that this child would be born, who was going to be the king of Israel. And so he had this child sought after and said, I want every baby boy 3 years old and under to be killed so that I can make sure that this child is dead because no one's going to take over my kingship. He was rageful, jealous of this possible king that could take his kingdom. So they killed the babies. And so they said that Rachel back then was a forthcoming or what do they call it? A pre-coming. I don't know the word, see how you say that, but of this happening in the future, like a prophecy. And so, when that woman was telling that about the wound, the woman wound, Dan right away had a flash of like women even being stabbed in their abdomen area. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly what probably would have happened at that time. If the woman was shown pregnant, she was, the baby was killed inside of her. And what a wound. See, what we don't realize is that these things that have happened in our history, we carry us women up to this day. You men, what you've gone through in previous, in family history, previous times, that wound is carried within us. And so we're at the end of the age, if you will, where we're carrying a big load from all the ages because it's in our memory banks, whether we know it or not. So this wound is there in the feminine area, and a lot of women have surgeries there. They have to have their parts cut out down there. They have a lot of trouble down there because this wounding is very real. And so we need to heal that wound. Women need to be nurtured, but they've got to be nurtured by a whole man. And a woman needs to be able to love and respect their husband, not just respect them, but to love them and for them to receive that love and to be tender and respect the woman. And that was not respectful to kill women's own, children when that happened in that time of Jesus. And also Moses, remember Moses had to be put into that basket by his mother and sent off down the river, hoping that Pharaoh's daughters or would take the child and not kill it because there was an edict out for all the children, baby boys to be killed at that time as well. So there's been a lot of woundings of women losing their babies. And men maybe don't understand how serious that is to lose your children that came from your very womb that you carried and nurtured and suckled. And it's very difficult, very painful. But see, because men are not in their hearts, they don't really realize the severity of that and haven't. So we've got to get this balance just right. There's not a proper balance right now, but there needs to be. And so, women, we need to pray for our husbands that they be able to be healed in their damaged hearts and be able to have a real heart that pumps and works and is sensitive and feeling and sharing and emotional and real. And that women are a little bit more tougher and not so weak, because are women weak minded? Well, I don't know. Maybe we've become that way, and we need to be much more strong. Be willing to take some of our place a man shouldn't have to carry the whole load. Put it that way. What do you have to say about
Yeah, I
that?
agree. That's right. It helps. It helps when you share the load. We've shared the load a lot. You've done so many things I can't do. It used to be too, the men pays all the bills, the men watch all the money. Men aren't always the best money persons to handle money. Angela handles a lot of the money and juggles so many things that I couldn't juggle, but she appreciates what I do. I get out there and spray sometimes and smelly fumes and kerosene and you know what I mean? And do all kinds of God stuff. I fix the car, I jack up the
I'm
car, I
so glad.
paint cars, I do all kinds of stuff that she's glad I do. And but
Right.
anyway, like she said, but I can also cross over and sit down with her and write a book with her, and we could sit down and do dictation together and that's the way it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be that is her job and this is his job out there. He goes out there. That's the old way. That's not the new way. We're not living there anymore.
Yeah,
We're,
that's right.
we're this is a new time we're living in, and thank God it is.
Yeah,
Because men did have to carry a massive load, and all his decision, he has to make the decision himself. I'm glad I get to bounce it off her, and then she can bounce stuff off me. And then there's time when we say, well, let's just both think about it. Let's pray about it. Yeah, it's not like let me go into my room and make my decision, and then I'll let you know in an hour what I've come up with. So what a load to
right,
carry.
right. And it also said in that same book in the Bible, it was in Paul's writings talking about all of this. But men are the women are to respect the man. So when it comes to decision making, the way that I understood it, and I like it this way too, that if you can't come to agreement about what to do, then the man makes the final decision. And they said that man is under God's direction that way. So, he goes before God and he surrenders and submits to God's authority. And then women under the man. But see, the man is supposed to be a representative of God in the marriage, but that isn't always the case. And in the case where a man is not respectful of his wife and treats her with disrespect, um, I don't know. I think there's caution there for women. They need to take care of themselves. And so anyway, it's an interesting world that we're living in, and things are changing like crazy. And I'm excited to see these changes. Some of them are a little strange because we're in a weird place right now with men not knowing who they are and women not knowing who they are, and we're having a lot of crossing, which is I think going to end up being good in the end. But it's a little weird right now in
Yeah.
a lot of ways. A lot of things are not the same as they used to be. So
And there's
anyway,
there's relationships too, I know, where I knew men. You remember a while back when we went to that party and all the men were in the backyard smoking the
oh
cigars and
yes,
it was like the men were over here and they were talking about fishing and hunting and and they had their cigars and bullets and I'm gonna buy me a four-wheeler and I'm gonna do some fishing and hunting. I'm gonna go bear hunting this year. And the women were all over there.
and they were not supposed to be together.
Yeah, and they were in their own little circle and
I rebelled, of course.
it was like backwards. That was what happened when we came to Boise, and it was like, man, this is so weird.
Oh,
We've been in
yeah.
people's houses where a man will say, "Honey, you need to go in the room. I need to talk to them."
Right.
And I'm going to go in the kitchen and we're going to discuss the color. And she just sort of puts her head down and walks in the room.
We also went to this one church in Boise where the men clearly sat at the restaurants. The men sat together on the one side and the women sat together on the other side. And they literally made me get up from where I was sitting and come over to the women's side because that's how you do it.
Yeah, it was
And
weird.
yeah, it
And
was.
so this is what we're breaking out of. This is stupidity. I mean, there's people and guys and women that want to get to know Angela, and there's women and guys, and we're for everybody. We're here to serve. We're here to be a servant of God. So we have to be these multifaceted beings. You know what I mean? We have to share our love, not our intimate love, but our love. We have to share our love with everybody. The love that we get, the love that we are, is God's love. And so we share that with each other,
Yeah,
So,
because we're each individual and unique.
yep.
So anyway, I want to thank you for joining us. And by the way, I am Angela Clark, and Dan. This is Dan Clark. Dan is an intuitive breakthrough coach,
Yes, I am.
and I am an Empower Her life coach. And so, if you would like my services, I just want to have you know that I do have a website. They're developing a little part of it right now, where my scheduling it will be there, so you can go schedule and make your appointments. But for right now, if you would like to get a session with me, just go to Angela's Inspirations an S on the end of each of those words, @gmail.com. angelasinspirations@gmail.com. My website is angelasinspirations.com. And with an S again on the end of both those words. And Dan, how could they get in touch with you if you want to be coached by Dan? I want to give him an
Yeah, they can go
opportunity.
to My Prodigal Journeys, My Prodigal Journeys, at Gmail or
That's right, that's right.
at
at Gmail.
gmail.com. And you can just go there and there's a email there and text me or sorry, email me and we can go from there.
And
And
same thing with Dad's website right now too. My Prodigal Journeys, I'm sorry, prodigaljourneys.com is his website.
yes, yes.
So anyway, we enjoyed spending this time with you. We hope you got something out of it. And thank you so much for being here with us. And we look forward to next time.
Look
thank
forward
you.
to it. Thank
All right.
you.
Over now.
Over now.